My name's Lauren Chambers. I'm 28, live in Columbus, Ohio, and until recently I was working 2 jobs, bartender at night, admin at a dental clinic during the day. I was always close to my dad's mom, Margaret Hastings. She was a widow, lived in this gorgeous old Victorian-style home near Worthington, and always had this quiet wisdom about her. She wasn't overly affectionate, but she was warm in her own way. The kind of woman who'd bake you banana bread but never say I love you out loud. She showed it by action. When she was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer 2 years ago, I didn't think twice. I moved in to help. She didn't ask, I offered. My job let me shift hours, and I figured I'd only stay a few months. It turned into 2 years. 2 long, intense, beautiful, and sometimes brutal years. The rest of the family? Barely around. My dad, Russell Chambers, passed away in 2014. That left my Aunt Denise, my Uncle Paul, and their kids, my cousins Tessa and Ryan. They'd show up for holidays or when Grandma hosted Sunday lunches, but after her diagnosis? Crickets. Denise lived in Chicago. Paul lived 30 minutes away. They both had excuses, too busy, too emotional, too complicated. I wasn't judging. Cancer is hard. But I kept waiting for one of them to say, Lauren, let me take a weekend shift. It never happened. When Margaret passed in March, I was gutted. I'd been by her side at the end. I held her hand as she took her last breath. I sat with her body until the funeral home came. I didn't think about the estate. Honestly, I thought the house would go to Denise or Paul, and maybe I'd get something sentimental. The will was read a week later in her lawyer's office. Mr. Glassman, a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 70s who'd known Grandma for decades. My mom, Karen, came with me for support. She wasn't blood-related to Margaret but had always liked her. Paul and Denise were already seated when we arrived, both dressed in black like we were still at the funeral. Tessa and Ryan sat behind them, eyes locked on their phones. The mood was tense. Mr. Glassman cleared his throat and began reading. He went through the usual formalities. Then he got to the big part, the distribution of assets. And that's when the room went silent. To my beloved granddaughter, Lauren Chambers, I leave the entirety of my estate, including the property at 117, Cranbrook Lane, all monetary assets, investments, jewelry, and personal belongings. There was a pause. A literal pause, like everyone was waiting for the next name. It didn't come. Paul actually laughed, one of those "are you *****ing kidding me" kind of laughs. Denise turned beet red and shouted, "That can't be right. There must be a mistake." But there wasn't. Mr. Glassman handed out copies of the will. It was legitimate. Dated 8 months before Margaret passed. Witnessed, notarized. Legally sound. And just like that, I'd inherited everything. According to the attached inventory, it was worth over $5 million. The room exploded. Paul started yelling about manipulation. Denise claimed I'd isolated Grandma. Tessa actually started crying, loud, dramatic sobs. Ryan muttered something like, "This is Bull's ****T, and stormed out. I just sat there, frozen. My mom squeezed my hand, but even she looked a little shell-shocked. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't asked for this. I hadn't expected this. I knew Grandma appreciated me, but this? Mr. Glassman, unshaken, passed around a letter Margaret had written, addressed to my family. It wasn't long. A paragraph, typed and signed. It read, "If you are reading this, then I am gone. I made this decision with a clear mind and full understanding of the consequences. I have chosen to leave my estate to Lauren because she was there. She gave her time, her patience, her love, without asking for anything in return. I owe her more than I can ever repay. To the rest of you, I love you, but I will not reward absence and entitlement." Paul threw the letter down like it was on fire. "This is manipulation," he barked. "She was sick. You took advantage of a dying woman." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My heart was pounding, my face hot, and I felt like I'd walked into someone else's life. Denise demanded a copy of the medical records. Ryan started talking about lawyers and contesting and fraud. I just sat there, stunned. That night, my phone blew up. Angry texts from cousins. Voicemails from Paul calling me a thief. A Facebook post from Tessa saying, "Money changes people. Some betray family for $1." I didn't respond to any of it. Not then. I was grieving, overwhelmed, and honestly, scared. But that was just the beginning. 2 days later, I was served with legal papers. Paul and Denise were suing me to contest the will. They were accusing me of undue influence, claiming Margaret wasn't mentally competent, and that I'd isolated her from the rest of the family. I wish I could say I was surprised. But I knew my family better than that. And I also knew something else, something I hadn't told anyone yet. Grandma had left me more than money. She'd left behind a journal. One that explained everything. And once I opened it, I realized just how deep this went. The lawsuit hit hard. I didn't know what was worse, the legal threat or the betrayal. I'd grown up with these people. Holidays, birthdays, road trips to Lake Erie. And now they were calling me a predator. A manipulator. Like I'd conned an old woman out of her will instead of cleaning up her vomit at 3 a.m. and helping her die with dignity. The irony? I hadn't even touched a dime of the money yet. The estate was still being processed. The house still felt like hers. I hadn't moved a single piece of furniture. Her slippers were still by the front door. But what changed everything was the journal. 3 days after the will reading, I found it. Tucked into a false bottom drawer in her old writing desk. It was a leather-bound notebook, worn at the corners, with a brass clasp and her initials, M.H., etched into the front. Inside the cover, in her delicate handwriting, it read, "If you're reading this, Lauren, I trust you found it on your own. I didn't want to tell you where it was while I was alive. I needed to know you'd choose to stay for me, not what I had." There were dates, starting in early 2015, right after my father died. I flipped to the first entry. March 4, 2015. Russ is gone. I can't believe it. My son, my sweet, stubborn boy. I thought I'd go before him. Denise came to the funeral. Paul didn't. He said he couldn't get off work. What work? He hasn't held a job for longer than 6 months in a decade. As I read, it became clear this journal wasn't just for reflection. It was documentation. She was chronicling our family's decline. One entry at a time. May 19, 2016. Paul asked me for $25,000 to invest in his landscaping startup. Told me it would double in 6 months. When I said no, he called me bitter. Said I was sitting on money I didn't even know what to do with. Said if Dad were alive, he'd make sure I didn't waste it. September 12, 2017. Denise forgot my birthday again. 3rd year in a row. Lauren sent me a letter. Handwritten. It made me cry. March 2, 2018. Ryan visited today. Brought his girlfriend, left after 20 minutes. I think he only came to ask if I'd help with his student loans. He didn't even ask how I'd been. There were dozens of entries like that. But what stopped me cold was one dated the same day I moved in, 2 years ago. April 18, 2023. She came. She brought her suitcase and her cat and moved into the guest room like it was nothing. Didn't ask for a penny. Just said, "I'm here for as long as you need." I didn't cry then. I waited until she went to bed. My eyes blurred. I remembered that day so clearly. She'd barely reacted. Just nodded and asked if I wanted tea. I had no idea what it had meant to her. And then the entries started getting darker. Colder. Focused. June 9, 2023. Paul texted me. Said he heard I was sick. Asked if I'd considered getting my affairs in order. It felt like he was circling. Like a vulture. I told him not to worry, I was handling everything. August 14, 2023. Denise called for the first time in months. Said she and Tessa wanted to come visit. I told her not to bother. She hasn't spoken to me since. October 28, 2023. Lauren changed my sheets 3 times this week. My hands are too weak now. I saw her crying in the laundry room. She thinks I don't hear her. She thinks she's hiding how hard this is. But I see everything. I always have. She had known. Every lie. Every excuse. Every absence. She saw through all of them. And she didn't forget. There was one entry I kept rereading. It was longer than the rest. December 3, 2023. They will be angry. I've changed my will. It's all going to Lauren. Every dollar. Every piece of me. And they'll scream. They'll sue. They'll twist the truth. But the truth is, they left me long before I died. Lauren stayed. Not because she thought she'd get anything, but because she couldn't not stay. That's the kind of soul she has. I kept the letters. The text messages. The voicemails. I printed everything. Glassman knows where they are. He'll deliver them if it comes to that. Let them fight if they want. Let them rot in court. I'll be gone. But she'll have what matters. My legacy is not the house. Or the bank accounts. It's the person I leave it to. That night, I sat on the couch in that big old house, surrounded by silence, and read the entire journal cover to cover. I realized something important. Grandma had anticipated all of this. The lawsuit. The anger. The accusations. She hadn't made an emotional, deathbed decision. She'd made a calculated one. Over years. With clarity. And she hadn't just left me money. She'd left me proof. The next day, I called David Halperin, the estate lawyer I'd hired the second the papers arrived. I handed him the journal, along with a box I found in the closet labeled Correspondence, Keep. Inside were printed emails. Screenshots. Letters. Voicemails saved to USB. A full archive. Paul asking for money again in 2022, this time for a crypto mining warehouse. Denise writing her a guilt-tripping letter after Grandma refused to co-sign on Tessa's private college loan. Ryan texting her in all caps demanding she'd just wire $10,000 and stop acting broke. David raised his eyebrows. This is substantial. I nodded. She kept receipts. We filed the official response to the lawsuit the next morning. Included the journal as evidence. Cited the medical assessments from her doctors, 3 of them, all dated within weeks of her updated will. All confirming full mental competence. Paul's lawyer tried to paint it as manipulation. Called me an opportunist. Claimed I separated Margaret from her family. But David just handed the judge a stack of birthday cards, every one of mine for the past 10 years. Full of notes. Updates. Gratitude. And then the printed record of missed calls from her landline. 32 of them, calls she made to Paul and Denise in the year before her diagnosis. Only 3 ever answered. And even then, they were under 90 seconds each. The judge didn't throw the case out, but it was clear we had the upper hand. But that didn't stop the family from trying something even worse. Tessa went to the press. She contacted a local online paper, one of those low-tier, drama-hungry blogs. Told them her grandmother's young gold-digging granddaughter stole the family fortune through emotional manipulation. And they ran it. Complete with photos of me from social media. The article headline? Worthington heiress accused of family betrayal in $5 million will war. And that's when things really blew up. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed, and didn't stop. Dozens of notifications. At first I thought someone had died, or maybe there was a weather emergency. Then I saw the headline. Worthington heiress accused of family betrayal in $5 million will war. Ohio Chronicle Online. Complete with a photo of me pulled from Instagram, me smiling, holding a margarita at my friend's bachelorette weekend in Nashville. I looked like the villain in a Hallmark movie, the scheming millennial who seduced her dying grandmother into signing over the mansion. They quoted Tessa directly, of course. My cousin Lauren manipulated our grandmother during a vulnerable time. We were all pushed away, and then she swooped in. Now she's living in a house she didn't pay for with money she didn't earn. They didn't even bother with fact-checking. Didn't mention that I'd lived with Margaret for 2 years. Or that I'd sacrificed 2 jobs and my social life. Or that my grandmother's own journal documented every lie, loan, and betrayal. Comments poured in like sewage. What a disgusting little gold digger. She's probably laughing all the way to the bank. Another spoiled brat who thinks caregiving earns her millions. I hope the family sues her into the ground. I called David, my lawyer. He sighed. We could file a defamation suit, but it might only pour gasoline on the fire. My inbox was full of interview requests. Podcasts. Local TV. Even a producer from some trashy reality show reached out, asking if I'd be interested in sharing my side of the inheritance scandal. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I shut the curtains and barely left the house. But the worst part? My old friends started pulling away. 2 people I'd known since college unfollowed me. One girl I'd worked with at the dental clinic posted a vague TikTok about snakes in rich girl clothing. It was like I'd turned radioactive overnight. That weekend, I was sitting in the living room, still half numb, flipping through Margaret's old mail pile. She'd kept everything, receipts, grocery lists, greeting cards. Most of it was junk. But then I found something strange. An envelope. Thick. Sealed in wax. Postmarked, July 1978. Addressed to Margaret Hastings, private. Return address, J.T. Marchand, Akron Federal Prison. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a long, yellowed letter, neatly written in blue ink. There was no introduction. No dear Margaret. Just this. I know you said never to write. But it's been 11 years, and I think of her every day. I dream about the sound of her crying through the walls. I see your face when they took her away. I know you blame me. Maybe you should. But I also know what we did. And I'm tired of keeping it locked inside. You told the police what they wanted to hear. I understand. You had to protect what was left. But I still remember the basement. The smell of the furnace. The box and the floorboards. She never forgave either of us. I don't think I ever will. If she ever reaches out, tell her the truth. Don't lie to her like we lied to the others. I sat there, heart pounding. The letter didn't explain much, but it said enough. Something had happened in that house. Something involving a girl. A daughter? Was Grandma hiding a child? I went back to the journal. There were no entries from the 1970s. But in a back pocket, behind the last page, I found a folded newspaper clipping, dated 1967. Woman hospitalized after apparent self-harm incident in Worthington home. Margaret Hastings, local schoolteacher, was treated at St. Mary's for non-life-threatening injuries. No charges filed. The article barely gave any information. Just said the incident was domestic in nature and that privacy had been requested. I needed more. I called Avery, a friend from college who worked in archives at the Columbus Historical Society. Hey, I said, this is random, but do you know how I could pull sealed court records? Or old CPS files? Sealed? She asked, surprised. What are you digging into? Something buried. Really buried. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. You might want to check probate records from 1968. Worthington had a weird string of sealed cases that year. Something involving a girl named Emily. It was scrubbed hard, but her name kept popping up in staff rosters at a group home in Dayton. No surname. Emily. That name made my skin crawl. Back home, I dug through a chest in the attic. Inside were old family photos, some of my dad, some of Grandma as a young woman. And then I found one that chilled me to the bone. A photo of a girl, maybe 10 or 11, with long, dark hair and white eyes. On the back, in faded marker. Emily, 1966. That's when I knew. Margaret had a daughter. And for some reason, she had erased her from the family history. I didn't sleep that night. I kept rereading the prison letter. What box in the floorboards? What furnace? What had they done? The next morning, I called David. If they want to drag me through court, let them, I said. But we're going to war with the truth. He was quiet for a second, then asked, what changed? I'm not just fighting for an inheritance anymore, I said. I'm fighting for Margaret's story. For the real one. Not the version they're screaming to the press. I made a copy of the letter from prison and sent it to David. Then I uploaded it to a secure drive and hid the original under my bed. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It wasn't even close. Because the next day, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name. Inside? A photograph of Emily. A recent one. Gray hair. Wrinkled face. Sitting on a bench. And a post-it note stuck to the bottom that read, she's still alive. And she knows what happened. I stared at the photograph for over an hour. It was a recent image, clearly taken within the past year. A gray-haired woman sitting on a park bench. Her face was lined but striking. Sharp cheekbones. Thin lips. Eyes with that same piercing intensity Margaret had, even near the end. The resemblance was uncanny. The post-it note stuck to the bottom said, she's still alive. And she knows what happened. No sender. No return address. Just those 10 words and a photograph that cracked open a secret I hadn't known existed until 3 days ago. Emily. My grandmother's lost daughter. Hidden from history like a deleted paragraph in a family novel. I thought maybe the letter from the inmate had been cryptic or metaphorical. Now I knew it was real. And someone else knew too. I turned the photo over. On the back was scribbled, Bridgeview Park, Lancaster. I'd never heard of it. Quick Google search told me it was a sleepy, half-forgotten retirement town about 90 minutes south of Columbus. I mapped the location. It was real. And so, apparently, was Emily. I left the next morning. Didn't tell my lawyer. Didn't tell my mother. Drove alone, with Margaret's journal on the passenger seat and my thoughts buzzing like a hornet's nest. Bridgeview Park wasn't a real park, I learned, it was the name of a care home. A quiet little residential facility nestled behind a Lutheran church and a strip of dentist offices. I parked across the street and sat there watching for a full hour, unsure what to do. Then she walked out. No walker. No wheelchair. Just a slow, deliberate walk down the sidewalk, hands in her cardigan pockets. Same eyes. Same cheekbones. She looked like Margaret, aged in reverse. I got out of the car, heart slamming against my ribs. Emily? I called out. She froze, slowly turning. Her eyes narrowed. Who are you? My name is Lauren Chambers, I said. I'm Margaret Hastings' granddaughter. Her jaw clenched. Then she turned and walked away. Wait, please, I called. I just want to talk. I found a letter. I said no, she snapped. You shouldn't be here. I know what happened in 1967, I said quietly. That stopped her cold. After a long pause, she exhaled, turned back, and said, come back tomorrow. Noon. I'll give you an hour. Not a minute more. Then she went inside. The next day, I came back, notebook in hand. Emily met me in a small sitting room filled with dusty books and overwatered ferns. She poured herself tea but didn't offer me any. You said you found a letter, she said, straight to the point. I pulled out the copy of the 1978 prison letter. Her hand trembled slightly as she read it. Still writes like a coward, she murmured. Even from behind bars. Who was he? I asked. She looked up. Joseph Marchand. My stepfather. The name hit like a slap. Stepfather? My mother married him in 1962. A year after my real father died in a car crash. I was 10. I didn't breathe. She continued. At first, he was charming. Kind. Then things changed. Fast. He'd lock me in the basement when I didn't behave. Said the furnace would teach me obedience. Then the real abuse started. She paused, fingers tightening around her cup. I told Margaret. She didn't believe me. Said I was just being dramatic. That Joseph was good to her. She called me ungrateful. Said I'd ruin everything. I felt sick. She left me down there for 3 days once, Emily said quietly. No food. No light. Just the furnace. When the school called about my absences, she finally came down. But instead of helping me, she slapped me and told me to lie. My mouth went dry. Why would she protect him? Emily's eyes gleamed with something colder than anger, bitterness aged like wine. He made her feel safe. Provided for her. Told her the world was cruel and only he could protect us. She bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. I whispered, what happened in '67? Emily leaned back. I ran away. Told a neighbor. CPS got involved. Joseph was arrested. Margaret told the police it was all exaggerated. Said I was unstable. I was put into foster care. They sealed the records to protect her reputation. She never visited me once. My throat closed. She erased me. Pretended I never existed. I wasn't even listed in her obituary. Did you know that? I shook my head. She sent me one letter. In 1979. Said she hoped I'd forgiven her. I mailed it back. Unopened. I'm sorry, I whispered. It felt useless. But it was all I had. Emily looked at me for a long time, then said. She left you everything, didn't she? I nodded. She always needed to rewrite the story. Pretend she was better than she was. Guilt ate her alive, so she gave it all to you. Probably figured it would make up for what she did to me. I reached into my bag and took out a photograph, Margaret's favorite one of her, taken the year I moved in. I placed it on the table. Emily stared at it. Then, slowly, she placed her hand on mine. You didn't ask for any of this, she said. But you're holding the match now. So make sure you know what you're burning. That night, I returned home to chaos. Paul had filed a new motion to freeze the assets, accusing me of destroying potential evidence by removing items from the house. He claimed I'd gone through private correspondence and was actively tampering. David was furious. This isn't a legal battle anymore, he said. It's scorched earth. They're not scared of losing money, I replied. They're scared of what she buried with it. I told him about Emily. The foster care. The abuse. The sealed records. He sat in silence for a full minute, then said, You realize this could flip the whole case. How? If Margaret withheld information during the creation of the will, specifically about heirs she chose to conceal, it could reopen probate proceedings. Especially if Emily makes a claim. I blinked. Would she? David gave me a look. Would you want $5 million if your mother erased you for 50 years? But I knew Emily wouldn't. That wasn't her style. She didn't want the estate. She just wanted the truth to come out. The next morning, I woke up to find something strange taped to the front door. A copy of the same newspaper article that had smeared me online, but this one was scribbled all over in red pen. Circles. Arrows. Notes. In the corner, one sentence written in all caps. You don't deserve it either. Underneath that, another. Blood doesn't make you worthy. No signature. No indication who left it. But the message was clear. Someone knew what I had uncovered. And someone was furious. After the anonymous threat was left on my door, I stopped sleeping. I started locking every door, every window, even the one above the kitchen sink I used to crack open for fresh air. I kept the lights on in the hallway, left my car keys by the front door in case I needed to bolt. I'd grown up in this house, its creaky floors and chimney smells were once a comfort. Now? It felt haunted. Not by ghosts, but by secrets clawing to the surface. The worst part? I didn't know who to trust. Could have been Paul. Denise. Maybe even Ryan. They were furious, desperate. But the handwriting? Something about it didn't feel like theirs. The tone was different. Harsher. Personal in a way even my cousins hadn't been. And then 3 nights later, it got worse. I woke up at 3:12 a.m. to the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. The living room window, blown out. A rock the size of a grapefruit lying on the floor, surrounded by shards. Taped to the rock with black electrical tape was a single sheet of paper. Typed. No handwriting. Stop digging. Let the dead rot. Or you'll join them. I called the police. They filed a report, took the rock, dusted for prints, nothing usable. They chalked it up to domestic dispute fallout. One officer suggested I might want to consider toning it down online as if I was the one posting dramatic rants. But this wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore. Someone wanted me afraid. The next morning, I met with David at his office and gave him everything I had, the rock, the threat, the new note. He looked more serious than I'd ever seen him. Between the threats and the break-in, we can request a protection order, he said. And do what? Tell the judge we think one of the entitled cousins turned full psycho? I shook my head. They'll think I'm trying to make them look worse before the next hearing. David paused, then leaned forward. There might be another way. He slid a document across the table. It was a list of property assessments Margaret had filed back in the 1980s. Nothing unusual, except for a hand-drawn blueprint at the end. What is this? I asked. Your grandmother's original floor plan for the house. I looked at it, and felt my stomach twist. There was a door in the basement. A room that didn't exist anymore. That night, I went down into the basement with a flashlight and crowbar. The air was musty, dry, the kind of stillness that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I counted the paces along the blueprint, then tapped on the wall with the crowbar. Thud. Thud. Hollow. I found it. Behind an old storage cabinet was a section of wall that sounded wrong. I pried the paneling back, and revealed a rotted wooden door. No knob. Just a latch. I opened it. Inside was a small, windowless room. Maybe 6 feet wide, with concrete walls and a sloped floor. In the corner, a rusted metal cot. A coil of old rope. Scratches on the wall. Dozens of them. Some shallow. Some deep. And then, in the middle of the far wall, etched into the concrete. Emily was here. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. This was the furnace room. The basement Emily had spoken of. My grandmother hadn't just ignored the abuse, she'd built a tomb around it. There were other things. A metal box tucked beneath the cot. Inside, a child's bracelet, a rotted cloth doll, a notebook with pages too faded to read. And at the very bottom of the box, a photo of Margaret. Smiling. Holding hands with Joseph Marchand. On the back. Christmas 1963. The year everything changed. I called David that night. We need to go public, I said. No more waiting. No more courtrooms. He hesitated. You want to give this to the press? No, I said. Not to the press. To who then? To Emily. I met her the next day in Bridgeview Park. This time she didn't walk away. I handed her a flash drive with the photo, the blueprint, and images of the hidden room. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "She left that room intact?" She sealed it shut. But never destroyed it. Emily's hands trembled slightly. I used to stare at that wall for hours. I'd count the scratches. They were my days. I wanted to say something comforting. But there were no words for this. She built a life around forgetting, Emily said. And now the whole house is caving in. I hesitated, then asked, "Do you want any of it?" The money? She scoffed. I want her legacy. Not her leftovers. I blinked. What do you mean? She looked at me like I'd missed something obvious. She gave it to you. Her house. Her name. Her story. That makes it yours to fix. The following week, I made a decision. I met with David, then with a journalist I trusted, a real one. No clickbait. Just facts. I handed her the journal. The photo. The letters. The prison correspondence. The blueprint. She agreed to publish the story under one condition. No edits. No spin. It ran 2 days before the court hearing. Headline. Sealed room, sealed past, how a hidden daughter revealed a family's legacy of silence. It was brutal. Raw. Honest. It laid out the abuse. The denial. The financial battle raging in the shadow of a bigger truth. The backlash was instant. Tessa deleted her Twitter. Ryan posted a 3-paragraph non-apology on Facebook that started with, "We had no idea," and ended with, "Please respect our privacy." Paul released a statement through his lawyer, calling the story sensationalized garbage and threatening his own defamation suit. It went nowhere. Denise? She vanished. Deleted every social profile. Never showed up to the hearing. And Emily? She sent me one last letter. "You didn't owe me this. But you gave it anyway." That's more than she ever did. Tell them I don't want the house. Or the name. Just tell the truth. The court hearing lasted all of 45 minutes. David presented the journal, the sealed room discovery, the proof of full mental capacity. The judge looked at Paul and his lawyer, then simply said, "Do you wish to proceed with the contest?" There was a pause. "No, Your Honor," the lawyer mumbled. "We're withdrawing the petition." That was it. It was over. I walked out of that courthouse into sunlight I hadn't felt in months. Real, unfiltered sunlight. And for the first time since Margaret died, I could finally breathe. But the story wasn't over. Because one thing still lingered in my mind, one page in Margaret's journal I hadn't shown anyone. Not even David. Not yet. After the court hearing, things went quiet. No more angry phone calls. No new subpoenas. The online noise faded into the background, replaced by silence. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it lingers. Like a house after the guests have all left and the wine has run dry. Paul never apologized. Neither did Denise. Ryan tried to reach out once, left a voicemail that started with, "Look, I just want to talk," but he didn't say much after that. Tessa never tried. They'd lost, but they didn't feel beaten. They felt exposed. And that, I think, was worse for them. But through it all, I kept coming back to that one journal entry I hadn't shared. Margaret's last entry. The one she dated 3 weeks before she passed, in shaking but still legible handwriting. I'd found it folded separately, tucked in an envelope inside the journal's back cover, labeled simply, "Lauren, for you only." I hadn't read it when I first found it. Maybe I was scared of what it might say. Or maybe, deep down, I wasn't ready for the weight of whatever her final words were. But now, the estate was mine. The lawsuit was over. The family had imploded. And I was ready. So I opened it. February 28, 2024. Lauren. If you're reading this, then they've probably already called you things I won't repeat. I knew they would. That's why I left this separate. This letter isn't about money, or houses, or lawsuits. It's about why. I didn't leave it all to you just because you cared for me. Though you did, and it meant the world to me. It wasn't even just because you were kind or patient or stayed through the worst of it. I left it to you because I saw her in you. Emily. You have her eyes. Her fire. Her refusal to abandon people, even when they've failed you. I don't know if you believe in such things, but I do. I believe blood is complicated, but souls? Souls echo. I made the mistake of choosing silence over protection. I thought love meant defending the man who made me feel safe, even as he hurt my daughter. I told myself she'd recover. That she was exaggerating. That I was being torn in two and had no choice. But I did. I chose wrong. And I've been trying to make it right ever since. That's why I wrote the journal. That's why I saved the letters, the receipts, the pictures. That's why I kept the room even after I sealed it. Not to hide the past, but to remind myself what truth costs when you bury it. I left you everything not because I thought you'd forgive me. I left it to you because I believed you would tell the truth, even if it cost you everything. That's what real inheritance is. Not money. Not land. It's responsibility. And now it's yours. M. I read it twice. Then a third time. And by the end, I was sobbing. The kind of ugly, shuddering sobs I hadn't let myself feel since the night she died. Grief, rage, gratitude, guilt, all tangled up in the same breathless collapse. Because she'd known. Not just about Emily. About everything. And she'd still chosen me. The house felt different after that. Lighter, somehow. I started moving furniture again. Cleaned out the upstairs storage. Donated most of the old jewelry. Kept just one ring, an opal I remembered from my childhood. I started planting a garden in the backyard where the old swing set used to be. Emily came by once to help. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Sometimes, healing isn't loud. It's a quiet replanting. I established the Hastings Truth Foundation, funded through a portion of the estate. Its mission? To provide legal and emotional support for adult survivors of childhood abuse. I named Emily as an honorary co-founder. She didn't show up for the launch. But she sent a handwritten card with a single line. Make the pain useful. I did. A year later, I sat down to write the Reddit post you've been reading. Not to get validation. Not even to ask if I was the asshole. I know I wasn't. But because I wanted to share what people never say when they talk about inheritance, about family, about so-called gold diggers. Sometimes, the money isn't what divides a family. The money just unmasks what was already broken. They said I ruined the family. But I didn't destroy it. Margaret did, the moment she chose to protect her husband instead of her daughter. Denise did, the moment she turned away from her mother's suffering and made everything about her pride. Paul did, the moment he started treating Grandma like an ATM instead of a person. They broke the family. I just refused to keep pretending it was whole. The last thing I did was return to the basement one last time. The sealed room had been untouched since that night. But now, I opened it again, this time not with fear, but with resolve. I cleared out the cot. Removed the old box. Washed the walls. Painted over the scratches, but not before taking photographs, documenting everything for the foundation's archives. Then I installed a plaque on the far wall. Simple. Bronze. Etched with words Margaret never said aloud, but left in her journal. Truth is not the enemy. Silence is. M.H. And below that. In memory of Emily Hastings. And all the children who were told to lie. It's been 18 months since Grandma died. I still live in the house, though it feels less like hers now. More like mine. I've hosted small dinners here. Opened it for community events. There's a piece here now that wasn't here before. And when I walk past the garden at sunset, I sometimes think I see her. Not Margaret. Emily. Watching. Silent. But no longer erased. Not anymore.